I've never shared this before. Not with my wife, not with my closest friends. I've carried it for years like a bad taste I can't wash out. It wasn't supernatural, at least I don't think it was. But it left me questioning how much of what we see can be trusted, and how safe we really are when we think we're alone. I was 32 when it happened. My buddy Mark and I had planned a weekend camping trip in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. Nothing fancy, just two guys, a tent, a cooler, a cheap beer, and a chance to get out of Albany for a couple of nights. I worked IT support back then, long hours, always on call. He was a warehouse manager for a Walmart distribution center. Both of us needed a break. We picked a state campground that wasn't too popular, the kind of place where the check-in office was just a small cabin with a bulletin board of warnings about bears and ticks. We drove up Friday afternoon, parked, carried our stuff down a short trail, and set up near a lake. Across the water, maybe 200 feet away, there was another campsite. At first glance, it looked empty, just a tent pitched on a patch of grass near the trees. We laughed about how perfect it was. Nobody close by, no screaming kids, just us and the lake. We grilled hot dogs, cracked beers, and by sunset we had a small fire going. I remember looking across the water and noticing a glow. The other campsite had a fire too. I thought it was weird because we hadn't seen anyone cross the trail or unload gear, but it didn't bother me. Lots of campers set up earlier in the day. Around 10 p.m., Mark and I were sitting by our fire when I noticed something. The fire across the lake was burning higher, brighter, even though nobody was around it. No voices, no shadows moving near the flames, just a steady, strong blaze. I pointed it out, but Mark shrugged, said maybe they turned in early. Still, I kept glancing back. Fires don't just feed themselves. By midnight, our fire was down to glowing coals. Across the water, the other fire was still going strong, not flickering or dying, but steady, like it was being tended. That night, I woke up around 3. Nature called, and I slipped out of the tent. The night was dead quiet, except for crickets. My eyes drifted to the opposite shore. The fire was still there. Exactly the same height, the same glow. Not lower, not out. I felt my skin crawl. The next morning, I told Mark. He brushed it off, said maybe the other camper has used one of those fake propane fire pits people bring now. That made sense. I let it go. We fished that day, hiked a bit, came back by late afternoon. The tent across the lake was still zipped up, no sign of life. But as dusk settled, right on cue, the fire flared again. Big and steady, like someone dumped gasoline on it. Mark finally admitted it was odd. He even joked, maybe it's park staff keeping a fake fire going so the place looks full. We both laughed, but it didn't really explain why the tent looked untouched. That night, neither of us slept well. Around 2, we heard splashing in the water, like someone wading near the shore. We both sat up in the tent, listening. It went on for a couple of minutes, then stopped. In the morning, I walked down to the waterline. The soil was soft, muddy. There were footprints, bare footprints. Not boots or sneakers, bare human feet. They led from the water toward our side of the lake, then vanished in the dirt. Mark swore they weren't his. They weren't mine either. We debated packing up, but it was just one more night, and neither of us wanted to admit we were freaked out. We stayed. That evening, I couldn't help myself. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the opposite campsite. The tent flap was closed, no gear outside, nothing that suggested people were staying there. And yet, on schedule, the fire came alive. We sat by our own fire, drinking in silence, both of us stealing glances across the water. Around midnight, I said screw it and suggested we prattle over in the canoe. Mark said no way. He was visibly nervous, which made me feel worse. Later, when he was asleep, I lay awake, staring through the mesh of the tent. The glow on the water was constant. I checked my phone camera again, zoomed all the way, and my hands were shaking, but I swear what I saw made no sense. The fire burned, but there was nothing feeding it. No logs, no pit, no propane tank, just flames standing on their own, licking the air. I closed the phone, heart pounding. At some point, I must have dozed off. When I woke at dawn, the glow was gone. The tent across the lake was still there, untouched. We packed up fast that morning. Neither of us wanted to admit why. When we carried our stuff back to the car, we passed the check-in cabin. An older ranger was sweeping the porch. I mentioned the other campsite, asked if anyone had reserved it. He looked at his clipboard and shook his head. Nobody's booked that site for weeks. I remember my stomach dropping. I wanted to ask more, but Mark cut me off saying thanks, and we left.
I've shared ghost stories around campfires before, but nothing prepared me for the night I first heard the screams. I'm not a horror writer or an attention seeker. I'm just a guy who loves the woods. What happened feels impossible, but every detail is burned into my memory, and I swear on my grandmother's grave it's all true. If you're reading this, please believe me. I had driven up to Cherry Creek Campground in central Pennsylvania with 3 friends. My college roommate Chris, his girlfriend Jenna, and our mutual buddy Marcus. We'd reserved our spot weeks in advance, excited for a weekend of fishing and quiet nights under the stars. The downloading satellite map showed nothing but dense forest and winding trails, exactly what we wanted. We pitched tents, stacked firewood, and cracked beers just as the sun dipped behind the hemlocks. By 9 o'clock, the fire was roaring and Chris strummed his guitar while Jenna roasted marshmallows. The chatter faded to comfortable silence as embers danced and fireflies wove in and out of the light. That's when I heard it. A scream so high-pitched it rattled my teeth, slicing through the night like a blade. It didn't sound human. It was too sharp, too precise. My heart lurched and I froze mid-swallow. Chris turned his head. "Did you guys hear that?" Jenna's eyes were wide. Marcus laughed, dismissing it as an owl or some prank by campers across the ridge. But I knew the difference. I'd spent summers hiking these woods. An owl's screech doesn't fracture your bones. An owl doesn't mimic a child's shriek and morph into static. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the tree line, its beam flickering with nervous energy. "No one's around," I whispered, voice cracking. Chris followed me to the edge of our clearing. The forest stood eerily still, limbs like twisted arms reaching into the sky. Then it came again, a drawn-out wail that reverberated through the pines, like metal scraping bone. Jenna stifled a sob. Fueled by a mix of fear and stubborn curiosity, I told them we should check it out. Marcus refused, saying we'd get lost if we wandered too far from camp. But Chris and I slipped between trunks, the flashlight bouncing wildly. Our shadows grew and shrank on the underbrush. We walked maybe 50 yards when the ground trembled underfoot, a low thud, like something massive shifting in the darkness. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were enormous, at least twice the size of any human boot. But the kicker was the toe arrangement. Long, slender digits splayed in an irregular pattern as if the foot had been mutated by some cruel whim of nature. The mud held the impression perfectly, and a chill shot through me. Chris swore he saw claws where toenails should be, hooked and dripping with sap. I fumbled for my phone to record them, but the screen flickered and died. Every device went dead. Phones, radios, even our headlamps glowed weakly before sputtering out. The once comforting moonlight felt like it had been swallowed whole. In complete darkness, we heard a low-frequency hum vibrating through the soil. It wasn't wind or distant traffic. It was coming from beneath the forest floor. I pounded my fist on the bark of a nearby tree and yelled, "Let's go back!" Chris hesitated, shining his light at a moss-covered depression in the earth. It looked like a widening pit, as if the ground itself was opening to swallow us. We scrambled backward, only to collide with Jenna and Marcus stumbling into us, drawn by our voices. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with terror. Back at the fire, I retrieved my handheld recorder and pressed play. Instead of our earlier conversation, the device played back a guttural chanting layered beneath the original scream, a rasping voice that whispered obscenities in a language I couldn't place. My stomach dropped. Jenna screamed and crushed the recorder under her boot, glass and metal shattering. We packed hastily, ignoring half-empty coolers and abandoned tents. As we loaded into the car, I noticed scratch marks etched on the hood, long, deep gouges that didn't match any animal in the area. The engine turned over, but the headlights were dim, flickering like dying candles. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Chris held his breath. When we rolled forward, the beam caught something standing at the edge of the campground, tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs bent at awkward angles. Its head tilted, listening. Then its mouth opened in a silent scream. No sound issued, but I felt it resonate through my chest. It stepped forward, bypassing trees as if they weren't there. I floored the accelerator. Tires spun, kicking up gravel, and we lurched forward. Behind us, I thought I saw dozens of pairs of glowing eyes emerging from the woods like a tide of corpses. Jenna screamed again, pressing her face into her hands. Marcus pounded on the passenger window, tears streaming down his face. The car burst onto a paved road, and its bright glare forced the creatures back into shadow. My foot remained planted on the gas, and we didn't slow until we reached the highway's edge. At the first gas station, we gassed up in complete silence. No one spoke, afraid to break the fragile barrier between us and whatever lurked behind. I got home 2 nights ago. My apartment is in a well-lit part of town where cell service never falters. Yet each night when I lie down, I still hear it, a distant, broken scream echoing in my dreams, like something scraping against the fabric of reality. I've tried to rationalize it as stress or a hallucination brought on by too much Red Bull and sleep deprivation. But I found a photograph on my phone this morning, taken just as we sped away, that shows a face pressed against the rear window. Hollow eye sockets and an unnatural grin and teeth too sharp to belong to any human. I deleted the photo, but I know it's only a matter of time before whatever it is makes contact again, because the screams weren't human, and they don't belong here. If you ever camp in a place so remote it boasts no cell signal, heed my warning. When the silence is shattered by a scream from beyond the trees, don't investigate. Run, and never look back.
I've camped at Lake Wallenpaupack in Pennsylvania almost every summer since I was a kid. My parents used to bring me and my sister here in July, and now I bring my own family. It's a safe, family-friendly place. Boat rentals, fishing docks, a little marina store that sells overpriced ice cream. Last August, we booked a weekend at one of the lakeside campsites. It was me, my wife, our 12-year-old daughter, and our dog. We set up the tent Friday afternoon, grilled hot dogs, and watched the sunset over the water. The lake was calm that night. A few pontoon boats drifted near the far shore, their lights glowing faintly. By 10 p.m., the campground was quiet, except for the occasional splash of a fish. We went to bed early. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of our dog shifting around in his crate. At first, I thought he just needed to go out, so I unzipped the tent and stepped into the cool night air. That's when I saw them. Small white lights, maybe the size of a flashlight beam, moving slowly across the surface of the lake. not in a straight line, more like weaving back and forth. At first, I thought it was a boat, but there was no engine noise, no sound at all, except the faint lapping of water. I stood there for a minute, trying to make sense of it. The lights weren't steady. They'd pause, then dart a few feet, then stop again. I went back into the tent and grabbed my phone. No service. I switched to the camera anyway and tried to zoom in, but the lights were too far away to capture clearly. My wife stirred and asked what I was doing. I told her there were lights on the lake. She mumbled something about fishermen and went back to sleep. I stayed outside, watching. After a few minutes, I realized the lights were getting closer to our side of the lake. Not fast, but steady. I thought about calling out, but something about the way they moved made me hesitate. When they were maybe 50 yards from shore, they stopped completely. I waited. Then, one by one, they went dark. The lake was black again. The next morning, I mentioned it to the guy camping 2 sites down. He said he had been up late by his fire and hadn't seen anything. I walked down to the shoreline where I had seen the lights. There were no boats, no kayaks, nothing. We spent the day swimming, fishing, and hiking. I tried to forget about it. That night, we stayed up later, roasting marshmallows. Around midnight, I noticed a small aluminum fishing boat tied to the dock near the marina. It wasn't there earlier. No one was around. At 3 a.m., I woke up again. This time, I didn't hear the dog. I just woke up. I unzipped the tent and looked toward the lake. The lights were back. Same size, same slow weaving motion. But now, there were more of them, maybe 6 or 7. I watched for a while, then decided to walk down to the dock. The air was cold, and the boards creaked under my feet. The lights were about 30 yards out now. I could see faint reflections in the water, but nothing above the surface. No shapes, no people. I pulled out my phone again. Still no service. I took a few photos anyway. That's when I heard something behind me, the sound of footsteps on the gravel path leading to the dock. I turned, expecting to see another camper. No one was there. When I looked back at the lake, the lights were gone. In the morning, I checked my phone. The photos were just black frames with a few faint white smudges. I walked to the marina store and asked the clerk if people ever fish at night out there. He gave me a strange look and said, "Not without running lights. It's illegal." I told him I had seen lights moving across the lake. He shrugged and said maybe it was kids with flashlights on paddleboards. But the way he avoided eye contact made me think he didn't believe that. We were supposed to leave Sunday afternoon, but my wife suggested we stay one more night since the weather was perfect. That evening, I sat by the fire until everyone else went to bed. I kept glancing at the lake. At 2:45 a.m., I walked down to the dock again. The aluminum fishing boat was gone. The lake was still. I waited. At exactly 3 a.m., the lights appeared. This time, they were already close to shore. I could see the water rippling around them, but still no sign of what was making them. I took a step forward, and one of the lights stopped moving. It stayed pointed directly at me. I froze. The others kept weaving, but that one didn't move. After maybe 20 seconds, it went out. The rest followed, one by one. We left the next morning. On the drive home, I checked my phone again. There was a new photo in my gallery I didn't remember taking. It was of our tent from the shoreline, taken at night. Why, I can't explain it. I've tried to come up with a rational explanation. Maybe it was night fishermen using some kind of gear I don't know about. Maybe kids playing a prank. But the silence, the way the lights moved, the photo on my phone, none of it fits. I haven't been back to Lake Wallenpaupack since then. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night and pass a body of water, I catch myself scanning the surface for small white lights, and I wonder if they'd recognize me.
We'd been planning the camping trip for weeks. Just me, my wife, and our two friends, Mark and Jenna. We picked a state park in western Maryland, Greenbrier State Park, because it was close enough to drive after work on Friday, but far enough to feel like we'd gotten away. We pulled into the campground around 6 p.m., set up our tents, and got a fire going. The site was perfect. A picnic table, a fire ring, and a short path down to the lake. We'd brought a big red Coleman cooler, the kind with wheels and a handle. It was packed with burgers, hot dogs, eggs, milk, and a few beers. We kept it under the picnic table, in the shade. That first night was great. We grilled, told stories, and stayed up until almost midnight. Before bed, I made sure the cooler was closed and latched. I even pushed it closer to our tent so raccoons wouldn't get into it. When I woke up around 7 a.m., the first thing I noticed was the empty space next to the tent. The cooler was gone. At first, I thought maybe Mark had moved it to his car, but when I asked, he shook his head. Jenna hadn't touched it either. We checked the whole site. Nothing. It was heavy, at least 40 pounds with all the food inside. No way an animal dragged it off without leaving a mess. And there were no torn packages, no trash, no trail of food. Just gone. We walked the loop road through the campground looking for it. A few people were making breakfast, but no one had seen anything. I went to the camp host site and told him what happened. He said thefts were rare, but not impossible. He offered to call the park ranger. The ranger showed up about 20 minutes later. He asked if we'd heard anything in the night. We hadn't. He wrote down a description of the cooler and said he'd keep an eye out. The rest of the morning felt off. We made coffee and ate granola bars, but everyone was quieter than usual. Around noon, I decided to walk down to the lake. On the way, I passed a site about 5 rows over. There was a red cooler sitting by the fire ring. It looked exactly like ours. I slowed down, trying not to stare. A man in his 40s was sitting in a camp chair reading. I couldn't see inside the cooler from where I stood. I almost walked over and asked, but something about the way he glanced up at me made me keep moving. When I got back to our site, I told Mark what I'd seen. He wanted to go confront the guy, but my wife said we should let the ranger handle it. We waited until the ranger drove by again and told him. He said he'd check it out. An hour later, he came back and said the cooler at that site wasn't ours. Different brand, different latch. I didn't believe him. That night, we locked all our food in the cars. I still felt uneasy. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. As I stepped out of the tent, I saw movement near the picnic table. A person, tall, wearing a hoodie, was standing there looking at our stuff. I froze. They didn't notice me at first. They bent down, picked up our camp stove, and set it back down. Then they turned and walked away, heading toward the road. I followed them for a few steps, but they disappeared into the dark.
In the morning, nothing else was missing. We packed up to leave, but before we pulled out, I drove past the site where I'd seen the red cooler. It was gone, and the man was gone too. Why it still bothers me. I keep thinking about how heavy that cooler was and how quietly it must have been taken. I keep thinking about the person in the hoodie and whether they were the same one who took it. And I keep thinking about the ranger telling me the cooler I saw wasn't ours without letting me look inside. It's not the missing food that bothers me. It's the feeling that someone was watching us while we slept, and maybe still is.
Last October, my wife and I decided to take a short camping trip before the weather turned cold. We picked a small state park in upstate New York, one we'd been to before in the summer. When I called to reserve a site, the ranger told me the main campground was already closed for the season, but the overflow loop was still open for self-registration. That meant fewer people, more quiet, sounded perfect. We arrived on Friday afternoon. The overflow loop was nearly empty, just 2 other sites occupied. The main campground, visible through a line of trees, was gated off with a chain and a "closed for season" sign. We set up our tent, made dinner, and sat by the fire until about 10 p.m. The night was still and cold. No wind, no bugs, no distant highway noise. Around midnight, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The vault toilet was a short walk down the road, past the turnoff to the closed campground. As I got closer to the gate, I heard something. Laughter. Not loud, not wild, just the sound of a few people talking and laughing around a campfire. I stopped. The sound was coming from inside the closed campground. I could see faint orange light flickering through the trees, like from a fire. I stood there for a minute, trying to make sense of it. The place was supposed to be empty. No one was allowed in there. I thought about calling out, but it felt wrong. I used the bathroom and walked back quickly, avoiding the gate. In the morning, I told my wife. She said maybe the rangers were having a get-together. But when we drove past the main campground entrance on our way to a hiking trail, the gate was still chained and locked. No cars inside. That night, we stayed up later, playing cards by the fire. Around 11:30, the laughter started again. This time, my wife heard it too. We both walked down the road toward the gate. The sound got clearer. Voices, clinking bottles, the occasional burst of laughter. Through the trees, we could see the glow of a fire, but there was no shadows moving around it. We stood there for maybe a minute before my wife whispered, "Let's go back." The next morning, I decided to ask the camp host about it. He was an older guy who stayed in a small trailer near the entrance. When I mentioned the laughter, his expression didn't change, but he said, "That campground's been closed since September. No one's in there." I told him we both heard it. He shrugged and said maybe sound was carrying from somewhere else. But there was nowhere else. The nearest houses were miles away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. The air was freezing. The fire at our site had burned down to embers. From the direction of the closed campground, I heard it again. Laughter. Faint, but distinct. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. When I reached the gate, the sound was louder. I shined the light through the trees. The fire was there, burning steadily, but the picnic tables around it were empty. The laughter kept going. I called out, "Hello?"
The laughter stopped instantly. The firelight flickered once, then went out. I stood there in the dark, my breath visible in the beam of my flashlight. After a few seconds, I turned and walked back to our site, trying not to look over my shoulder. In the morning, I told my wife we were leaving a day early. As we drove past the closed campground, I glanced through the trees. There was no fire pit in the spot where I'd seen the flames. Why it stays with me? I've tried to explain it away. Maybe someone snuck in and left no trace. Maybe the sound was from hunters or night hikers. But the way the laughter stopped the moment I spoke, and the fact that the firelight vanished instantly, doesn't fit. I haven't been back to that park since. Sometimes late at night, I think I hear faint laughter outside our house, and I wonder if it's just in my head, or if someone followed us home.
I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I work long shifts, I've done nights in bad neighborhoods driving Uber, and I've camped plenty of times before. But what happened last summer at Racetown Lake in Pennsylvania still keeps me up at night. It was supposed to be a quick weekend trip. My wife, our 10-year-old son, and I booked a campsite at 7 Points Campground. We'd been there before. Clean bathrooms, a little camp store, families everywhere. The kind of place where you feel safe leaving your cooler out while you walk to the water. We got there Friday afternoon. The site next to ours was empty when we arrived. Just a patch of gravel and a picnic table. By the time we finished setting up our tent, a small green dome tent had appeared there. No car, no people, just the tent. I figured maybe they'd walked in from another site or parked somewhere else. Not a big deal. That evening, we grilled burgers, played cards, and went to bed early. Around midnight, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. On the way back, I glanced at the green tent. No light inside. No movement. It looked too perfect. Like it had just been set up for a catalog photo. The next morning, my wife asked if she'd seen anyone over there. I said no. She hadn't either. Our son said he heard someone zipping the tent in the middle of the night, but kids imagine things. By Saturday afternoon, it started to feel weird. Every other site had the usual camping clutter. Chairs, coolers, towels hanging from trees. This one had nothing. Just the tent. I walked past slowly on the way to the trash bins. The zipper was fully closed. No shoes outside, no campfire ring in use. I couldn't even tell if there was a sleeping bag inside. That night, we sat by our fire until almost midnight. Still no sign of anyone. I started making jokes about it being a display tent for the campground. My wife didn't laugh much. Sunday morning, I woke up early and decided to walk to the camp store for coffee. On the way back, I noticed something new. The tent's zipper was open about 6 inches. I slowed down, expecting to hear movement inside. Nothing. When I got back to our site, my wife was standing by the picnic table, looking pale. She said she'd just seen a man standing between our sites, facing our tent. She thought it was me until she realized I was still walking back from the store. We checked around. No one there. The green tent was zipped shut again. That was the first time I felt real unease. We decided to pack up a little early. While I was rolling up our sleeping bags, I kept glancing at that tent. I wanted to just walk over and unzip it, but something in my gut told me not to. As we loaded the car, a white pickup pulled into the site across the road. The driver, a guy in his 50s, got out and started setting up. I asked if he had seen anyone in the green tent. He looked over and said, "That tent's been there since Thursday. Nobody's touched it. I told him about the man my wife saw. He frowned and said, "You should tell the ranger." We did. The ranger came by, knocked on the poles, called out, then unzipped it halfway. I was close enough to see inside. It was empty. No sleeping bag, no gear, nothing. Just bare ground. The ranger zipped it back up and said, "Sometimes people leave old tents behind, but this one looked brand new. No dirt, no fading." We drove home that afternoon trying to make sense of it. My wife kept replaying the moment she saw the man. She swore he was standing still, hands at his sides, watching our tent. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I checked my phone. I had a new text from an unknown number. It was just a photo. It showed our campsite from the road, our tent, our car, our chairs, taken during the day. I woke my wife and showed her. She wanted to call the police, but what would we even say? Someone sent us a picture of our campsite? I saved the number and tried calling it. Straight to voicemail. No greeting, just the automated, "This mailbox is full." The next morning, I went through my phone's location history. It showed a pin from Saturday night, not at our campsite, but about 200 yards away near the tree line. I hadn't been there. I checked my social media. My Instagram account had a new follower with no posts, no profile picture, and a username that was just a string of numbers. The account was following only me. I blocked it. A week later, a package showed up at our house. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of green tent fabric, same color as the one at the campground. We didn't tell anyone, not our friends, not our families. We just stopped camping. I still drive past Racetown Lake sometimes for work. Last month I pulled into the campground out of curiosity. The site we stayed at was empty. The one next to it had a tent. Green. Same model. No car, no people. I didn't get out of the truck. Why this unsettles me? I've tried to explain it away. Maybe someone was using the tent to stash gear and didn't want to be seen. Maybe the photo was from another camper who thought it was funny. But the timing, the package, the man my wife saw, none of it fits neatly. I thought about going back with friends, setting up cameras, trying to catch whoever it is. But part of me doesn't want to know. Because if it's just some random creep, that's bad enough. And if it's not random, that's worse.